Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm going to say it now. The Allentown pedigree stuff, which was so much fun, also kind of killed me. I was traveling at the same time, doing a bunch of research, and it was great, but I fell behind on the regular auction stuff. So the April 2025 comics and comic art signature auction from Heritage, kind of snuck up on me. It's actually up and running already, and here I am doing a preview. So yeah, with that in mind, I'm gonna just do 13 lots in this preview, a baker's dozen, and then I'm gonna do a much deeper dive in the review because there's a lot of really good material in this auction. I just chose 13 that would make me happy. Um, I might cover like 50 lots in the review. There's that much good stuff. There's really like a ton of good material in this. There are no $5 million comics. There's huge pieces of original art, however, and some of the smaller comics are a lot of fun. So, a couple of which are in here, but not all. And so, yeah, I'm spoiled for choice, and I'll go to town in the review. But for now, I'm just trying to catch up. So here we go. Sorry. Usually I get these out before the auction has actually started, but such is life. You may not know it, but X-Men 268 is one of my favorite X-Men comics, kind of post John Byrne. Certainly in my top five. And that's actually a video I should do. It'd be interesting because it's a pretty long stretch, like from the 80s until the present day, and like picking X-Men comics I like. There's some Grant Morrison in there, some Paul Smith, and some Jim Lee. Pretty cool. But anyway, I mean, this issue is amazing. It's Wolverine, Captain America, Black Widow. What more do you want? Jim Lee at the height of his powers, although he's kind of still at the height of his powers. This book alone should just be a Marvel movie. That'd be awesome. Do it. I haven't seen, by the way, like I'm one of the many people that kind of just totally soured on the Marvel movies, and I kind of feel bad about it because I was like so into it and so excited all the time, and now I just don't even care. This is what it would take to get me back. If they did an X-Men 268 movie, I'd be like, yes. Anyway, it's an incredible Wolverine page from Jim Lee and Scott Williams. As of this writing and recording, it was $20,000. It's going to go for a lot more. I mean, it's crazy. Look at that Wolverine image. Love it. And Jim Lee is hot as heck right now. He just sold, like $100,000 of new art because the Batman Hush 2 is out, and he just released that. I'm going to do a short about that because you don't always get to see the Albert Moy prices, and I captured a few of them before they went out the door. So, but I digress. If the 395th appearance of Spider-Man's black costume is worth $3.2 million, what's the actual first in-story appearance of Iron Man worth? Don Heck, Tales of Suspense 39, story page number 7. I have no idea what it's worth. It's probably not going to be $3.2 million, but who knows? This is so historically important, it like blows my mind. And actually, what's funny is looking at this panel, I realize I've never actually read Tales of Suspense 39. I've never owned one. I collected Tales of Suspense, but only the Captain America issues. So I've never had a copy of this book and have never flipped through one or read a reprint or anything. I'm gonna have to get a reprint and read it. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't get any better than this. I mean, it's not an action page, but it's actually still dynamic. The image of Iron Man in the last panel is great, and it's the first appearance of Iron Man. Like, you could own the first appearance of Iron Man. That's nutty. So, do I look excited? Do I sound excited? I'm excited. I told you this auction is. I love it. I would never have chosen this, right? Like, if I just scanned and like looked, like Herb Trimpe cover 144. Incredible Hulk. It was like some of those covers, actually, in that era, some of the Hulk covers are amazing. So I might have thought twice about it. But like as I was scrolling through the featured listings, I saw this cover and I was like, oh yeah, that's amazing. I had forgotten about it. Doctor Doom, Hulk, battle cover. It's just amazing. And yeah, so it's already at $200,000, which is, it just goes to prove that like Herb Trimpe is not just Hulk 181, although he is, right? Like, that's a pretty big legacy. Um, But he did some more. He was vital to the title for a long time and was a talented artist beyond just being the man behind Wolverine. And look at this image. This is all you need to know. It's so dynamic. And yeah, I love it. Love a nice battle cover, especially when Doctor Doom is involved. So, as you all know, or maybe don't know if you're new to the channel, I love Doctor Doom. He's one of my 5 favorite Marvel villains. So, more Doctor Doom. I'm reminded by this non-pedigree but still stunning copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 5, CGC 9.6 off-white white. I'm reminded of an early vision that I had of what the top end of the hobby could look like, at least in terms of quality. I worked at Superhero Universe when I was a kid, as I've mentioned. It's a comic shop in Boston. It was actually a chain, so there were a couple in Boston and Cambridge, and then there were 3 in California. And advertised in, the price guide and comics and stuff like that. It was relatively well known, not mile high level, but it was a thing. And I worked there, and I worked for a guy named Steve Atherton, who was a local dealer. I live in Massachusetts. He lived in New Hampshire, so we would do conventions in this kind of area: New Hampshire, Maine, Connecticut, Boston. I worked with him at Superhero Universe, and I also worked with him doing conventions. So I would hop in his van and we would drive and huck books, and it was the whole deal, that life, which was great. Actually, I got to meet a lot of people, see a lot of books, learn about the hobby from that side very early. So it was very cool. Anyway, I also worked for him at Superhero Universe, and one day he was doing a deal in the store, as happened. He was doing a deal with Bashar Maloof, who many of you will know. Bashar is one of the primary original art dealers right now, but he's also just a collector, and at the time was selling a lot more comics and whatever. And so the deal was for a pair of Amazing Spider-Man, early Amazing Spider-Man books. I believe it was 5 and 6. And I remember looking at them and just being in disbelief at the quality. I didn't have the grading chops that I do now, because no one did, really. It was hard to think of grading the way that we do now with the precision, especially if you weren't actually at the top end of the hobby, talking about this stuff and working, at Sotheby's or whatever. So I didn't, have the skill I have now, but I remember looking at them and just thinking that they were perfect. I couldn't see anything wrong with them, and I had never seen a Silver Age book that looked like that. That was absolutely perfect. You would get a book that was near mint, and it wasn't, right? It was very fine, by our current grading standards. But it was, most of what you saw was VG, fine, maybe VF, and that was it. And to see too, what I imagine, I remember being kind of 9.4, 9.6 books from 1963. It just blew my mind, and I remember them distinctly. Yeah, so I'd never seen vintage books that nice. I think they sold for $500 each, maybe, or maybe $500 for the pair. I would actually have to look back and see what, in the context of that late 80s, what would the price would have been. But it was a lot of money for the time. Of course, it's all through the roof right now. This book is $40,000, something like that. We'll see. Yeah, and what would those kind of numbers, $30,000 for this book, have done to my teenage brain? I couldn't even get over the condition, and to think that in a couple decades' time, that book would be worth $30,000 would be mind blowing. Okay, the highest graded copy of this book is a CGC 8.0. This copy is tied with 3 at 6.5. Detective Comics number 1, CGC 6.5, cream to off-white pages, which is pretty good for a book from 1937. The highest graded copy that has ever sold, according to GPA, so that doesn't include private sales and doesn't include Comic Link, but includes a lot. The highest graded copy that ever sold is the Lost Valley copy, which is a CGC 5.0, and it sold in 2005. This copy looks great and is basically once in a lifetime opportunity to own a gorgeous copy of one of the craziest and most important books in the hobby. I mean, think about it. The best copy that's ever sold in GPA sold 20 years ago and is a full grade and a half, a full point and a half below this book. So this is unique, and there aren't many better copies of this book. It's really hard, and it's amazing. So, yeah, go all in on this one. If you want, this is one of those things, right? Like there are some books. I talked about this before on the channel. If you're collecting Golden Age, sometimes you just have to empty the bank and just get the thing because the thing might never come back around again. You don't know how long it would take for another 6.5 or even 5.0 of Detective Comics number 27. I mean, Detective Comics number 1 to come up for sale. You just have no idea. And maybe this will sell for $250,000 and a couple will come out of the woodwork. Who knows? You can't rely on that. You just can't. So if you're in for this book, go all in. It's my only advice to you. It'll be interesting anyway. Toughest Marvel book that anybody actually cares about? I'm assuming that nobody really cares much about Tales to Astonish 27. Okay, some people do, and I think it's a neat book, but I mean, it's not Hulk number 1. Hulk number 1 is insane. Tough book. I talk about it in the context of DCs about how like, oh, Hulk 1 is so difficult. And then you look at some of these DCs from the 50s and they're like twice as hard to get in high grade as Hulk number 1. That said, this is Incredible Hulk number 1, the first appearance of the Hulk and all of his associated supporting cast. It's a gigantic key. And the best copy is a 9.4. There's not many high grade copies at all. None of the pedigrees shake out to have a gigantic 9, 8, $5 million book. So, and they don't sell that often. People buy them and they hold on to them. So, if you are looking for an Incredible Hulk number 1 with a 9 in the grade, here's your chance. The record for this book is $300,000, and that's 2017. The last sale in 9.0 is 2019. So, things have happened since then. Prices have gone up and down, and we're kind of in a new phase. I don't know. We'll have to see where this one lands. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. As an aside, in the context of like the most valuable comics in the world, I'm going to reevaluate the most valuable Silver Age comic books. And in specific, I want to talk again about how valuable I think Incredible Hulk number 1, CGC 9.4 is. I think that book is just magic because it is very difficult and it's a unicorn. But more content, like I said, I keep saying it's like I already have like 5 years of content planned out. I just need to do it. So stinking life gets in the way. I like my life, but I mean, come on. I love talking about comics too. Okay. All right. This one, somebody was talking about in the comments. I kind of owe a deep dive. I wonder, it probably would be popular actually. I owe a deep dive into what's wrong with kind of the early holders. Because I talk about them all the time, and it's like I kind of just have a shortcut that like everyone knows that like the first gen and kind of second gen holders are dangerous to the books. They just didn't hold the books well enough. Books could move around. You would see, in the worst cases, like books actually slamming into the inner well and tearing at the edge. But you certainly do see like books that are dented and stuff like that, most of which is pressable damage, but still you don't want to see it. So there's a certain risk in looking at a book that is in one of these old holders where you can't read any of the text in a scan. And you certainly can't read the grader's notes unless you have a microscope or can zoom in on the internet. Anyway, this book, grade date, 2000, March 6th, 2000. CGC has been sharing their 25th anniversary stuff recently, kind of February, March. And so this book has got to be one of the first, X number of books graded. 1,000 books graded? I don't know. And it's still in the old holder. The good news is it actually looks pretty solid. I looked at the book. I zoomed in. It looks pretty solid. I'd still prefer to buy a book that can't like legally drink in the United States. It's 25 years in that holder. And if I bought it, I would send it in. I would send it in immediately to get it out of that holder. That would be me, because I think it's actually pretty fair for a 9.2. Like, it doesn't look, nothing looked popped out at me as like being horrible when I zoomed in for the scan, but you can't always see everything. So, um, but yeah, 25 years, almost to the day it was graded. So, um, this copy last sold for $31,200 during the pandemic. The high for this book is 45,600 last year. So 5 years later, will this book do better? I'm kind of expecting it will. I would also like to see it sent back down to Sarasota and get a new home. Superboy #1, though. It's a great book. Suspense Comics #3, CGC 1.5, Off White to White. I didn't look at the graders notes for this one, so I don't actually know what's wrong with it. But there's obviously some paper loss and stuff like that. But the paper loss is on the edges, which is what you want with this book. You want the cover image to be basically whole, and it is. So there you go. This is your favorite classic cover's favorite classic cover. This is the granddaddy of them all, right? Like, at this point, the trend that we see now with classic covers selling for gigantic sums of money kind of really started with this book. At least in the CGC era, it's always been a thing, but like the first kind of just classic cover that sold for over $100,000 that's made headlines was this book. The church copy, when it came out, and went into a CBCS holder for some reason. Actually, no other reason, but it was surprising. At the time, it was surprising, and it was funny because we wanted to talk about it on the CGC forum, and they would, you get like banned or whatever for talking about CBCS, so we'd call them Voldemort books, which was ridiculous. I was like, felt like a child. I was like, this is insane. It's like, yeah, we're gonna pretend they don't exist. Sigh. It's okay. It was fine. I got over it, but it was funny, and yeah. So this book is awesome, and is really, for a 1.5, looks pretty great. The last 1.5, by the way, was horribly ugly. It sold last year, June 20th, 2024, and is just a mess. And it sold for $51,600. This other copy should sell for, I don't know, twice that. I mean, it's so much nicer looking. Just look at the two. Compare the two. Which one do you want? I don't want this one. I want this one. I mean, I wouldn't mind this one because I've never owned Suspense 3. Not many people have owned Suspense 3. It's a tough book. So, Art Adams and Terry Austin, New Mutants Special Edition #1, wraparound cover original art. This was probably worth a video at some point. Art Adams' legacy is probably underappreciated, which kind of sounds funny because he's still a star. But to me, it's like, his due is, he hasn't been given his just due. The level of detail in his work and the kind of stylized nature of his figures and his rendering style, it was really a turning point in the industry. You had kind of the Neal Adams, you had Jack Kirby era. People look like Jack Kirby and John Romita, and then you had Neal Adams bringing in realism, and then Art Adams came in and had this like kind of cartoony style, but still had an incredibly high level of detail and really dynamic figures and great action and just like really exciting everything, right? The layouts, the images, the character designs, the action sequences, the detail, the energy, like it just all crackled, and it was just amazing. And he was on these really exciting books in the 80s, and it was just, he was the whole, the full package. And, along with a few other artists, like Barry Windsor Smith, for example, this style led to the Image stuff. Those kind of like, they were Marvel superstars first, and then they went on to found Image, like people like Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, and Rob Liefeld. In one way or another, they kind of like flow out of the world of Art Adams. So I think he deserves more credit than he even gets. Although he gets a lot of credit because, he's a superstar. But he had something that people, like really grasped, and like held on to and worked to improve upon and just kind of built this kind of legacy that I think is amazing. And I'll zoom in a little bit more so you can take a look. There's a lot going on this cover. It's pretty insane. As a lot of his work is, it's nutty. But this one is great. And there's Loki. You gotta love Loki when Loki shows up. John Buscema and Al Williamson, Wolverine #1, splash page #7, original art, Marvel, 1988. It's a classic John Buscema Wolverine image, and unlike the Wolverine #1 cover, which sold recently for $600,000, Al Williamson inked this page. Al Williamson, as an inker in the 1980s, is one of the strange joys of Marvel in that era. If you think about it, Williamson seems like he should have been like ancient at that point. He was an EC artist. I mean, it's like Wally Wood was an EC artist. It's like Wally Wood worked in the Silver Age for Marvel. It's like, and then suddenly there's this guy who also worked for EC that's working in the 80s as an inker for Marvel. Inking Daredevil and some other things. But he was born in he was a pivotal EC artist. But he was born in 1931, so at this point he was only 57. There's a lot of like really great current comic artists who are 57 and older, right? So, but they don't all have the legacy of having worked for EC and like working with Frank Frazetta. Frazetta inked Al Williamson. Just remember that. Like, that's crazy. And then in the 80s, this guy was inking, John Buscema and John Romita Jr. Super fun. He was definitely, so like if you look back at it and like look at some of the kind of like discussion of it, he was taking a step back in his 50s. Penciling was too much for him. He put a lot of effort into it, but inking was fun. He could make a living at it, and he was just incredible. Just one of the best comic artists of all time. And he's your inker. Could you imagine walking into the Marvel offices and being like, oh yeah, hey, John Romita Jr., you're going to be on Daredevil with this like awesome writer, Innocenti, and we're going to have Al Williamson ink you. And I mean, I'd fall out of my chair, but that's me. I love this image. So hopefully it finds a good home. Marvel Spotlight #32, cover Gil Kane. First appearance of Spider-Woman. I've talked about it before on the channel. The Black Cat cover is a perfect example, and I talk about it in negative ways. All-Star Comics #8, where you can do a really good job of introducing a character on the cover. And you got to do it on the cover, and you have to do it dynamically, and you have to like make it exciting. This is one. I'm not a huge Spider-Woman fan, but who cares? Like, this would have excited me if I'd seen this on the newsstands when I was a kid. And I didn't, but I mean, what the heck? I would have loved it. And, why not, right? It's a really dynamic cover. There's a bunch of action. There's energy floating around. Nick Fury's in, like, distress. He's got his gun. He's got his eye patch. He's got that, like, kind of weird gray hair thing that Marvel characters all had. Reed Richards had that, too. It's, like, just gray hair. I don't know. Have you ever met anybody that has just, like, gray hair on the side? Somebody does, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, incredible. Already at $310,000 right out of the gate. So is this one going to go for $1 million? I don't know. Original art baffles me sometimes, but sometimes in a good way. And to see this already at $310,000 is amazing. That's already a record for Kane at Heritage, and that doesn't even include buyer's premium. $372,000 total cost right now, which is like twice the high for Kane. Now, obviously, there's some Gil Kane pages that would be $1 million, but the stuff that's sold, none of it's hit this, and this has got weeks to go. So it's gonna be interesting to see where it lands. I think it's a funky, very cool cover. So we'll see. Frank Miller and Joe Rubinstein, Marvel Comics Index, #9B, wraparound cover, original art, Daredevil. I remember this image vividly. Okay, so to start, Joe Rubinstein is not Klaus Janson, so it's not the absolute best possible inker if you're going to be buying a Frank Miller page. But I really, really, really like Rubinstein's work over Miller. I really like it. And it's almost like 1A and 1B with Janson. Janson has a certain dynamism with his inking, and it certainly influenced the way that Miller himself would render going forward. But Rubinstein is very good. over Miller. And this is a perfect example of that. I think this is a classic image of Daredevil, a classic image of Elektra, and then Black Widow, the Black Panther, Dazzler, Black Goliath, Human Fly, like all in the back, and what would be the back cover. It's crazy. Yeah, it's just amazing. And like really the image of Daredevil and Elektra alone could be like a t-shirt. Like I just think it's so perfect. And so can this be beat? Yeah, I mean certainly there's some images, some covers and stuff like that from the main Daredevil title that would trump this, but not many. I mean if you're looking for a Daredevil image, it really can't be beat. And this is big too. It's like, it'd be a really big display. It would be amazing to walk in. Maybe, maybe somebody will buy it for me, send it to me. My birthday's coming up. That's great. Thank you in advance. No, I hope it finds a good home because it is remarkable. It can't be beat. And I say that as a Daredevil nerd, so it means something, or it means nothing. I don't know. Who cares? I care. I care. Tom Yates, Saga of the Swamp Thing, number 21, cover original art. So if you're a fan of the Vertigo imprint, this issue is one of the primary building blocks of kind of the weird corner of the DC universe upon which Vertigo was founded. This issue, in which Alan Moore reinvented Swamp Thing's origin, kind of wiping away much of his previous history and reinventing him as this like avatar of the green, was like fundamental in changing DC and opening up this kind of, like I said, this weird corner of DC. The editor, of course, was Karen Berger here. She let Moore loose on this book, and it was the start of many such like really great decisions on Berger's part. In addition to Moore, she gave opportunities to most notably Grant Morrison and Neil Gaiman along the way, which set the stage for the Vertigo imprint, which would come later. Which was one of the most creative and kind of dynamic corners of the comics universe for many years. There are many comics fans today and comics writers and comics creators that only came into comics because there were things like Sandman and Swamp Thing and Animal Man and, pick your poison, right? Doom Patrol. And so, but this is where that started. It's one of the places in which it started, right? Is we started to like poke around this kind of dark, mystical, occult, funky corner of the DC universe. John Constantine, Hellblazer came out of this run not much later. So really important, and this is a remarkable image. I love it, and it feels like something that it's interesting because it kind of breaks with the past, but also really evokes that kind of 70s style of DC horror. And really fits in well with anything that Wrightson did. So I love this cover. I think it's historically very important. I think it's beautiful. It's a character I love, and it can't be beaten. So I'm ending with this one because it's about as exciting as anything. And so yeah, there you have it. I left so many good lots behind, and it's just the nature of the beast. I have to get through this preview. I have to get the Sotheby's video out. The Comic Connect auction, the Comic Connect event auction is ending next week. I'm going to have to review that because there's amazing stuff in that I know we're all excited to see where it lands. So there you go. But this small assortment, this kind of 13 books or whatever is just incredible, and I think, worth taking the time to run through. As for what's next, so the Comic Connect auction is coming up, and the 1991 Sotheby's script is done. So I just have to record that, but I just recorded this. I wrote this script and recorded it. Notes. I wrote notes for this. I wrote these notes and recorded this just to get it out before the auction was too far gone. And I'll do the Sotheby's thing. Maybe tomorrow, maybe Monday. I don't know. It'll be out this week. And then I'll follow up shortly thereafter with the Comic Connect event auction. So thank you. And as always, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, like, comments. Let me know what you think about these lots. Let me know what lots you're looking at in this auction so I can make sure to cover them in the review. And I'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.